relationship. And then there were two other people, two other women who also made allegations that Danny Masterson was charged with committing rape against, and he was convicted on both of those. Okay, and so there were essentially three charges because it's so like I said, it started way back in the 90s even, and so one of these women reached probably more than one reached a settlement with Danny Masterson for a not inconsequential sum of money, especially for the 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, $100,000. That's excessive.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, he probably at the peak of that '70s show, that was probably one episode salary for him, maybe less. When that '70s show was at its peak, you know, it's not uncommon to do $750,000, $1 million an episode if you have a high performing show.
So they went to whatever the, I don't want to say elders, but
so they went to the victims went to the appropriate people in the organization that is Scientology. Scientology is a fairly complex corporate structure, but I just refer to it collectively as Scientology because they're all acting on behalf of the organization. So they went to the respective counterparts, which would be auditors and some other people, and they were told, you don't take this outside Scientology. We will handle it here. Scientology, as I understand it, convinced Danny to pay this settlement. And he did, and there was a confidentiality and NDA non-disclosure agreement that was part of that. Right. Of course, that has all been set aside because a non-disclosure agreement, it's a little bit gray on whether or not you can actually justify somebody if you sign a non-disclosure agreement. You cannot legally be precluded from providing testimony as the victim of a crime due to some NDA.
Okay, so like a crime supersedes the non-disclosure. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. Yeah, in theory, so the settlements generally resolve the civil cases. If I settle a case and you pay me money, I give up the right to sue you in court because I took your money.
Right.
But if you are charged with a crime, even if I go to police after, if you're charged with a crime, the government still has the right to subpoena me to provide testimony at trial. And if I don't answer that subpoena, if I don't show up, then they're going to issue a bench warrant for failure to appear because a subpoena, as you know, is a court order to show up and give testimony.
Right, but if I show up, I don't have to testify, right? Like, I don't have to say anything. I could sit there and say, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to answer this question.
You could. Yeah, you could. I think that the law generally frowns upon using non-disclosure agreements by wealthy, powerful people to escape criminal culpability. It does adjudicate that. Oh, yeah, I don't disagree.
Right.
You and I both know that money makes the world go around. If I have a deep enough pocket to make enough wallet, there's not a whole lot that I can't take care of.
Yeah.
That's the reality of our criminal justice system. And we're still one of the best in the world. When I compare our criminal justice systems to others around the world, we're pretty efficient about when we catch people, about adjudicating their case. Those that do wrong things to go to prison. There are some who don't go to prison. Right. And there are people who are in prison who didn't do it. And unfortunately, one is way too many. Right. But there are some, but it's a very small percentage.
Well, and I was going to say, too, that I think, a lot of people are like, oh, you can get it covered up, you can beat the case. And usually what happens is, let's say if you're poor, you don't get as good of representation. And I believe that's true. But, I mean, you still go to jail. Like, you might get, if you were rich, you might end up getting 2 years. If you were poor, you might get 15 or 20 for the same charges. But the truth is, you both went to prison. I'm not saying it's fair that one person got 10, a decade longer. Look at Elizabeth Holmes. I mean, for me, her sentence is outrageously light in comparison to what most fraudsters would get. And it's not like she was the CFO of a company that fudged the number. This was an active fraud that she knew was a fraud that she took place in. And there were, I don't know if it was the $600 or $800, million missing or lost or whatever. So, but still, she did go to jail. She did get probably.
Well, if you go all the way back to 2008, and knowing your history, this may make a little more sense to you than it will some. You go back to the subprime mortgage crisis and the failure of Lehman Brothers. Every person on that board of directors should have gone to prison.
Right.
They didn't because it's Lehman Brothers. They're a Wall Street staple. They have these golden parachute provisions, and the SEC sort of had hat in hand because they failed to provide proper oversight, arguably, over the subprime mortgage. And the fact that I think at one point Lehman was leveraged 65 and a half to 1.
Right.
For every dollar in cash, they borrowed 65 and a half to buy bad mortgages. Every person on that board of directors should have gone to prison. But Wall Street people generally don't go to prison unless you're Bernie Madoff and you walk into the FBI and say, I committed a $65 billion fraud and my bank accounts are empty.
Right. Imagine how complicated that whole thing would be to have to go through. You know, like they decided. I think the problem with a lot of these guys who are just extremely wealthy is that they can mount a defense that is daunting. You know, like if you're if you're me, like you took all my money, I can't. Well, I have to get a public defender. My public defender is just not going to be able to, mount an adequate defense in my case with the amount of paperwork that was required. But the U.S. government can put, they can put 12 lawyers on it. Yeah, like they'll bury her.
Yeah, they're filing 2 motions a day, and she can't respond to a motion until she meets with you, and it's a whole thing. And I'll tell you, I have friends who are public defenders who practice exclusively criminal defense, both in the private sector and as public defenders. I have so much respect for public defenders, and they seem to come in 2 varieties. They're either outstanding lawyers.
Oh, I did get that for.
They can't put on an adequate defense, not because they're incompetent, but because they don't have the resources.
Right.
Or the public defender's office